Former Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison had been working as a private investigations consultant in Charleston, South Carolina, for 11 months since leaving the Navy SEALs. At 38 years old, Jake hadn't retired due to physical injury. He left because after 16 years of operations across multiple theaters, he made a tactical call during a hostage rescue in Iraq that got a civilian interpreter killed. The after-action review cleared him officially, concluding the interpreter's death resulted from enemy action rather than tactical errors. But Jake knew the truth that official reports couldn't acknowledge. He'd rushed the breach because he second-guessed intelligence timing, prioritizing speed over methodical clearing procedures. The interpreter died because Jake's judgment failed at a critical moment. The Navy offered another command, recognizing his operational record. Jake took retirement instead, unable to trust himself in life or death decisions where his failures cost lives. Now he conducted background checks and insurance investigations, work requiring attention to detail, but zero stakes where his failures cost lives. It was safe, predictable, and slowly hollowing him out because nothing about insurance fraud resembled the purpose that defined 16 years of service. His companion was Atlas, a 4-month-old German Shepherd puppy Jake adopted 8 weeks ago from a military working dog breeding program. Atlas had failed initial temperament screening for insufficient confidence and excessive noise sensitivity. Essentially, the puppy showed normal anxiety responses that rigorous MWD programs eliminated because operational dogs needed fearlessness from day one. German Shepherds were renowned for their intelligence, loyalty, strong work ethic, and protective nature, making them ideal for military working dog programs when they exhibited appropriate temperament early. Jake took Atlas as a project, something innocent to care for that didn't involve tactical operations, something that needed patience rather than performance, something that reminded him why protecting vulnerable beings mattered. On a pleasant Saturday evening at 1845 hours, when Charleston's historic district filled with affluent weekend crowds, Jake was having dinner at an upscale waterfront restaurant, seated at a corner table providing clear sightlines to all exits, habits from SEAL training that civilian retirement hadn't eliminated despite 11 months of deliberate practice. Atlas lay quietly under the table, wearing his service dog in training vest, while Jake worked on public socialization and basic obedience in controlled environments. The restaurant was busy with weekend dinner service, affluent couples celebrating anniversaries, business dinners with expensive wine selections, tourists enjoying Charleston's culinary reputation and historic ambience. At a nearby table, approximately 15 feet away, sat an upper-class couple in their early 40s exhibiting behavior. Jake's threat assessment training immediately flagged as problematic. Designer clothing worth thousands of dollars, expensive watches and jewelry suggesting substantial wealth, and most critically, the entitled condescending manner toward their young waitress that Jake recognized from years of reading power dynamics in operational environments. The man spoke to her with barely concealed contempt about water temperature, menu descriptions, and seating location. The woman added cutting comments about service quality and competence designed to humiliate. The waitress, named Jessica, according to her name tag, appeared to be early 20s, clearly inexperienced based on her nervous movements, doing her absolute best to accommodate escalating demands while managing 3 other tables during dinner rush. Jake recognized the statistical reality he'd read about in security industry reports. Research showed that 62% of restaurant workers reported suffering emotional abuse from customers, and 40% were actively considering quitting hospitality work due to such treatment. This couple was exhibiting textbook abusive customer behavior that had become epidemic in service industries. Progressive demands designed to be unsatisfiable, hostile tone escalating systematically, verbal degradation building towards something worse. When Jessica brought their appetizers after a standard wait time, the man inspected his plate with theatrical disgust designed to draw attention. "This presentation is completely unacceptable. The garnish is wilted. The portions are inadequate for the price point. Are you incapable of communicating our standards to the kitchen?" Jessica apologized profusely with genuine distress, immediately offered to have it remade properly. The woman added her complaints with equal disdain. "And the wine pairing you suggested is completely wrong. Do you have any training in sommelier work, or are you just guessing based on nothing?" Jake observed from his table with increasing concern born from threat assessment training. Research showed that 64% of restaurant workers experienced workplace violence during their careers, with incidents rising significantly in recent years. This situation exhibited classic escalation indicators that Jake's extensive training had taught him to recognize: progressive verbal abuse without satisfaction, demands specifically designed to be unsatisfiable regardless of response, dehumanizing language towards service staff indicating diminishing empathy. Jake considered intervening, but hesitated. He'd left the seals specifically because his judgment failed when stakes were high, resulting in death. Not his business, not his responsibility. Getting involved meant making decisions where he couldn't trust his own judgment. Then the situation escalated dramatically beyond verbal abuse. Jessica returned approximately 12 minutes later with replacement dishes, carefully navigating the crowded dining room during peak service with focused concentration. Atlas, being a 4-month-old puppy still learning public behavior and spatial awareness, shifted position under Jake's table. His movement was slight, but Jessica noticed and adjusted her path to avoid stepping on him. The slight adjustment caused her to pass closer to the couple's table than optimal spacing for service. As Jessica carefully set down the replacement plate with both hands occupied, the man suddenly stood and deliberately bumped her arm. Not hard enough to cause obvious assault that witnesses would immediately recognize, but enough to destabilize her balance while carrying hot dishes. Jessica stumbled from the unexpected contact. One plate tilted dangerously, and sauce splashed onto the woman's designer dress. The woman shrieked dramatically and leaped up from her seat. The man's face transformed with rage, disproportionate to the situation. Jessica immediately apologized with genuine horror. "I'm so sorry. I adjusted my path because of the puppy. Let me get towels immediately. We'll cover all cleaning costs." But the couple wasn't interested in apologies, solutions, or acknowledgement that the man had deliberately caused the contact that led to the spill. The man shoved Jessica, using both hands against her shoulders with enough force that she stumbled backward several feet, crashed into a service station, and fell to the floor amid breaking dishes with loud impact. "You incompetent girl! That dress costs more than you'll earn in 6 months. You're going to pay for this disaster." Jessica was on the floor, clearly hurt with visible blood from cuts caused by breaking dishes, trying to apologize while backing away from continued threat. The woman joined the attack with vicious intensity. "And there's a filthy animal in this restaurant. That's a health code violation. Whose dog is that disgusting creature?" Atlas, hearing the crashing sounds and raised voices that triggered his noise sensitivity, poked his head out anxiously from under Jake's table. A 4-month-old puppy in a training vest, ears flat against his head, clearly frightened by the commotion. The man noticed Atlas, and his rage found a new target. "That animal caused this entire disaster. It should be destroyed." He moved toward Atlas with clear, hostile intent, approaching rapidly with raised foot as if to kick the puppy. The woman encouraged him explicitly. "Kick it out of here. Filthy animal doesn't belong in a fine restaurant." That's when Jake's SEAL training overrode his careful avoidance of high-stakes decisions and his deliberate distance from confrontation where his judgment might fail. In the 2 seconds before the man's foot connected with a 4-month-old puppy, Jake was out of his seat and positioned protectively between them, intercepting the man's advance with controlled presence, communicating unmistakable capability without using force yet. "Stop," Jake said with the calm authority of 16 years commanding operators in hostile territory. "He's a service dog in training, 4 months old. Your waitress adjusted her path because he moved. That's normal puppy behavior we're addressing in training. You deliberately bumped her arm while she was carrying hot dishes. When she stumbled from your contact, you shoved her hard enough to knock her into furniture and cause injury, requiring medical attention. That's assault. You're now approaching a trainee service animal with apparent intent to kick him. That's animal cruelty. I witnessed everything. So did everyone in this restaurant recording on their phones." Jake gestured subtly to at least 9 diners holding smartphones, filming the confrontation. Modern restaurant reality, where research showed 65% of workers reported experiencing customer aggression, often documented by other patrons. The couple confronted documentation and witness testimony in real time. The man tried to advance toward Jessica, who was still on the floor bleeding from cuts. Jake maintained protective position using spatial control from close-quarters combat training, blocking the man's path without touching him. "She's injured and bleeding from dishes you caused her to drop. You assaulted her during dinner service. Move toward her again while she's vulnerable on the ground and it becomes aggravated assault. You deliberately caused physical contact, then shoved a waitress into furniture, causing injury. 200 witnesses in this restaurant. Multiple video recordings from different angles. South Carolina law is explicit about assault in public spaces. Step back. Now." The man's face flushed with rage, meeting unexpected resistance. He attempted intimidation using wealth and connections. "You have no authority here. I'll have you arrested for threatening me. Do you know who we are? I'm Douglas Whitmore, Senior Vice President at Whitmore Capital Management. My wife is Catherine Whitmore. Her family founded this city's oldest law firm. We have resources and connections that will destroy you." Jake's response was delivered with SEAL precision and legal knowledge. "I'm retired Navy SEAL. I documented this incident with the same observation protocols I used during counter-terrorism operations involving civilian casualties. You deliberately bumped your waitress's arm while she carried hot dishes. That's intentional physical contact. You then shoved her with enough force to knock her into furniture, causing her to fall and sustain injuries requiring medical treatment. That's assault and battery under South Carolina Code 16 to 3600. You approached a service dog in training with apparent intent to kick him. That's animal cruelty under South Carolina Code 47 to 140 and violation of federal ADA provisions protecting service animals in training. 9 people recorded it from multiple angles. I've provided testimony in 17 federal court cases during her counter-terrorism prosecutions. I'm very comfortable explaining to law enforcement what happened here, using precise legal terminology, timeline documentation, and coordinated witness statements. Your resources and connections don't concern me because video evidence, witness testimony, and law matter more than wealth. The restaurant manager arrived rapidly, having been alerted by multiple staff members and patrons witnessing the assault and its aftermath. Jake provided military precision account using skills from years of operational reporting. Comprehensive timeline of events with timestamps, specific legal violations with statute citations, accurate witness count, available video documentation from 9 independent sources. Jessica, bleeding from cuts requiring medical attention and visibly injured from the fall, confirmed Jake's version with trembling voice while paramedics were called. Multiple diners immediately volunteered to provide video evidence and written witness statements. Other staff members added that the Whitmores had been verbally abusive throughout their entire meal before the physical assault. The manager asked the Whitmores to leave immediately, or he was calling police without further discussion. Douglas made one final intimidation attempt using wealth and connections. "You're making catastrophic mistakes. We have connections throughout Charleston's business and legal community. This restaurant will be destroyed financially. And you," pointing at Jake with threatening intensity, "will face prosecution for threatening us. We'll ensure you regret interfering in matters that don't concern you." Jake's response was calm, but loaded with authority from operational experience. "Call police. Call your attorneys. Call anyone you want. I prevented you from assaulting an injured employee on the ground and potentially harming a 4-month-old service dog puppy. That's defense of another, explicitly legal under South Carolina law. You committed assault and battery witnessed and recorded by dozens of people. Every diner documented it from multiple angles. I'm former Naval Special Warfare with extensive federal court testimony experience involving far more complex cases than this. Your connections don't concern me because documentation, witnesses, and law matter more than wealth or social position." The Whitmores calculated rapidly. They were recorded committing assault by multiple witnesses, confronted by a veteran with obvious credibility and legal knowledge, surrounded by a restaurant full of people displaying clear disapproval and disgust, and their assault on Jessica was documented from numerous perspectives with timestamps. They exited without paying their substantial bill, threatening consequences and lawsuits as they left. Within 72 hours, the Whitmores leveraged their considerable connections systematically. Douglas used his financial firm's substantial resources and board connections to pressure the restaurant's investors about liability and reputation. Catherine's family law firm filed comprehensive complaints against the restaurant for health code violations related to the service dog puppy, against Jessica for deliberately causing the incident, and against Jake for assault and threatening behavior. They used extensive social connections to pressure the health department about service dog policies in restaurants. The restaurant owner, a veteran named Daniel Santos, who'd served in the Marines for 8 years, contacted Jake with serious concern. The Whitmores are using financial and legal connections to pressure everyone involved systematically. They're threatening extensive lawsuits unless we terminate Jessica and ban you permanently. They've filed police reports claiming you assaulted Douglas without provocation. I have video from security cameras and 9 customers showing he deliberately caused contact with Jessica, then shoved her when she stumbled, causing injury. But they have wealth, attorneys, and connections throughout Charleston. This could escalate significantly. Jake's instinct was immediate withdrawal. He'd left SEALs because his judgment cost lives, and confrontation triggered memories of that interpreter dying because of his tactical call. But Daniel added detail that fundamentally changed Jake's calculation. Jessica is 23 years old, working 2 jobs to pay student loans and support her disabled mother, who requires expensive care. She has visible injuries, cuts requiring stitches, bruising from the fall. She's terrified of losing this job because the Whitmores threatened to blacklist her from hospitality work throughout the region. She didn't cause anything. The man deliberately bumped her arm. Research shows 62% of restaurant workers experience abuse like this, and 40% consider quitting the industry because of it. This couple represents exactly why hospitality workers are leaving en masse. Jake realized this tested whether his retirement meant anything beyond relocated fear and avoidance of responsibility. The Whitmores represented unchecked abuse of power, wealthy people hurting vulnerable workers because they could, using connections to avoid accountability. Jake made a decision that required confronting the judgment failures that haunted him. He wasn't withdrawing. He was organizing defense using his SEAL operational planning skills that succeeded when properly applied. Over 3 weeks, Jake applied military precision to civilian context. He systematically collected video from 9 witnesses who recorded the assault, provided detailed statements using military reporting standards with timestamps and legal citations, connected Jessica with pro bono legal aid through veteran legal organizations, contacted veteran advocacy groups, recognizing this as harassment of both a veteran and a service worker, documented the Whitmores' pattern using research showing that 64% of restaurant workers experienced violence, 65% faced customer aggression, and incidents were rising dramatically across service industries. Research on service dogs for veterans with PTSD supported Jake's own journey with Atlas. Studies showed that veterans paired with service dogs experienced significantly lower PTSD symptom severity, with the service dog group scoring 41.9 versus 51.7 on standardized measures compared to control groups. Veterans with service dogs also had 66% lower odds of receiving PTSD diagnosis after 3 months of partnership. The service dog group showed lower anxiety, 4.4 points lower, lower depression, 3.3-point reduction, and higher psychosocial functioning across multiple measures. Jake's work with Atlas was helping him manage guilt and self-doubt from the interpreter's death, though confrontation like this triggered those memories intensely. The turning point came when local media outlets, having initially been fed the Whitmores' carefully crafted narrative about being victimized, received the actual unedited video showing Douglas deliberately bumping Jessica, shoving her into furniture, causing visible injury, approaching Atlas with intent to kick him, and Jake intervening with absolutely no physical force. The story transformed dramatically once evidence contradicted the Whitmore's claims. Wealthy couple assaults waitress, attempts to harm service, puppy. Veteran intervenes to prevent further violence. Public reaction was immediate and severe. The video went viral, with millions of views across multiple platforms. The Whitmores faced intense social media backlash. Douglas's firm received hundreds of complaints from clients concerned about being associated with his behavior. Catherine's family firm faced ethics questions about their intimidation tactics. Critically, other Charleston hospitality workers came forward with documented stories of the Whitmore's pattern of abusing service staff with complete impunity because wealth enabled systematic avoidance of accountability. Research supported these accounts. 64% of restaurant workers experienced workplace violence. 62% suffered emotional abuse, and wealthy perpetrators rarely faced consequences. Charleston Police Department reviewed all comprehensive evidence and charged Douglas Whitmore with assault and battery under South Carolina Code 16-3-600 for deliberately causing contact and then shoving Jessica, causing injury. The health department investigation found no violations. Atlas was legitimately in service dog training status under state and federal ADA provisions. The Whitmore's aggressive lawsuits were dismissed by a judge who noted pointedly in the written ruling, "Video evidence from 9 independent sources clearly shows plaintiffs initiated unprovoked assault on restaurant staff through deliberate contact followed by forceful shoving causing injury. Defendant's intervention was measured, controlled, and lawful under South Carolina. Defense of another statutes. This lawsuit appears to be retaliatory harassment against individuals who prevented animal cruelty and documented assault. Continued frivolous litigation may result in sanctions and attorney fee awards. Douglas Whitmore faced significant professional consequences. Whitmore Capital Management placed him on indefinite unpaid leave pending internal ethics review. He eventually resigned under pressure from the board concerned about reputational damage to the firm. Catherine Whitmore's family law firm faced ethics questions from the South Carolina bar about their aggressive intimidation tactics and use of legal processes for harassment purposes. Jessica kept her job with overwhelming community support that restored her faith in people after the traumatic assault. Diners specifically requested her service section, tipped generously, far exceeding standard percentages, and multiple other restaurants offered her positions with better pay and benefits if she wanted to move. Daniel Santos's restaurant saw measurably increased business from supporters who appreciated him backing his staff over wealthy bullies, demonstrating that ethical business practices could be financially rewarding. Jake and Atlas became local advocates addressing the documented epidemic of hospitality worker abuse. Jake began volunteering with organizations focused on workplace violence prevention in service industries, addressing the research showing 62% of workers experiencing emotional abuse, 64% facing workplace violence, 40% considering quitting the industry, and 65% experiencing customer aggression. Research on service dogs for veterans with PTSD continued supporting Jake's own healing journey. Studies showed that service dogs profoundly catalyzed growth among veterans with PTSD through providing emotional support and companionship, enhancing interpersonal relationships, reducing social isolation, reshaping core beliefs, and reinforcing sense of purpose. A major 24 clinical trial found that veterans with service dogs had significantly lower PTSD symptom severity, with 11.5-point reduction on PCL-5 scores and 7-point improvement on CAPS-5 clinician-rated measures. Beyond subjective measures, biological markers also pointed to therapeutic effects. Veterans with service dogs showed healthier cortisol awakening responses, indicating improved stress response systems. These consistent findings across multiple studies provided strong evidence for service dog efficacy in reducing PTSD severity. Jake's work with Atlas was helping him manage the guilt from the interpreter's death while giving him renewed purpose. Without the life or death stakes, he could no longer trust himself to handle. 1 year later, Jake was invited to speak at a major hospitality worker safety conference, attended by hundreds of restaurant industry professionals, labor advocates, and veterans working in service industries. Asked why he intervened when he'd left the SEALs to avoid high-stakes decisions where his judgment might fail, his answer became foundational for workplace violence prevention programs. Research shows 62% of restaurant workers suffer emotional abuse from customers. 64% experience workplace violence during their careers. And 40% are actively considering quitting the industry because of customer mistreatment. I watched wealthy people assault a 23-year-old woman supporting her disabled mother because dishes got sauce on an expensive dress after the man deliberately caused the contact. She couldn't defend herself against people with attorneys and connections throughout Charleston. Atlas was a 4-month-old puppy who failed MWD training for noise sensitivity. Exactly the vulnerable being bullies target because they can't fight back. Intervening meant confronting the judgment failures that made me leave service. The interpreter who died in Iraq because I rushed a tactical call. Research shows veterans with service dogs have significantly lower PTSD symptoms, 41.9 versus 51.7 on standardized measures, and 66% lower odds of PTSD diagnosis after 3 months. Atlas is helping me manage that guilt while giving me purpose. But watching abuse happen because getting involved is uncomfortable would have been worse than confronting my failures. Sometimes the most important operations aren't overseas. They're in restaurants where people serving us deserve protection from those who think wealth means they can hurt anyone without consequences, proving that sometimes being a SEAL means recognizing when assault is happening in front of you and deciding that your fear of making wrong calls matters less than preventing someone from being hurt when you have the training to stop it. The presentation included Atlas, now 16 months old, demonstrating advanced obedience and public access skills that proved noise-sensitive puppies could become confident service dogs with proper training and patience. 18 months after the incident, Jake had expanded his work to include training other veterans in service dog handling and consulting with hospitality businesses about workplace violence prevention policies that protected workers. He also began speaking at veteran mental health conferences about how service dogs helped veterans manage PTSD and guilt from operational decisions, using his own experience to validate what research demonstrated. Jessica completed her degree while continuing restaurant work, inspired by community support to pursue advocacy for hospitality worker rights and protection. The Whitmores largely disappeared from Charleston's social circles, their reputation permanently damaged by video evidence of who they were when they thought wealth provided immunity. 2 years after that Saturday evening, Jake received recognition from veteran service dog organizations for advocacy work that helped dozens of veterans successfully partner with service dogs and manage PTSD symptoms related to operational guilt and traumatic decisions. Research continued, demonstrating that service dogs significantly reduced PTSD symptoms, with meta-analysis showing clinically meaningful, significant, and large effects on PTSD severity scores. During an interview about his advocacy work, Jake was asked about reconciling his fear of judgment failures with decisive intervention. His answer captured his journey. "I left the SEALs because an interpreter died when I rushed a tactical call. I couldn't trust my judgment in life or death situations." Research shows only 9.1% of veterans complete PTSD treatment, with attrition exceeding 60%. "I was trying to avoid situations requiring judgment under pressure. But watching Jessica get assaulted while I did nothing would have been worse than the risk of my judgment failing again." Research shows veterans with service dogs have 66% lower odds of PTSD diagnosis and significantly lower symptom severity. Atlas is my partner in managing guilt while engaging meaningfully. The Whitmores had wealth and connections, but they couldn't overcome video evidence and people who refuse to accept that money buys immunity. Sometimes healing from judgment failures means accepting that avoiding every difficult decision isn't healing. It's just fear disguised as caution. Atlas taught me that confidence comes from patience and practice, not fearlessness. The most important judgment wasn't the tactical call in Iraq. It was deciding whether comfortable avoidance mattered more than stopping someone from being hurt when I had training to intervene safely. The wealthy couple who struck a waitress protecting a K9 puppy learned that wealth and connections couldn't protect them when a Navy SEAL witnessed their assault, documented it with military precision, and decided that fear of judgment failures didn't justify watching vulnerable people get hurt. Proving that sometimes healing from PTSD and operational guilt means recognizing that the 62% of restaurant workers who suffer abuse deserve witnesses willing to intervene even when it triggers traumatic memories, and that the most significant judgment happens not on distant battlefields but in ordinary restaurants where someone has to decide whether comfortable avoidance matters more than stopping wealthy, entitled people from assaulting a scared young woman who did nothing wrong except exist in a space where powerful people decided their inconvenience justified violence.